Welcome to Abode with After, the podcast where we step inside real homes and uncover the stories behind the renovations. I'm your host and interior designer Ashley, and I'm speaking with homeowners and industry experts about what it really takes to transform a house. Hi and welcome back to another episode of Abode with After. I'm going to dive straight into today's episode because we're going to talk about all things kitchens, and I feel like it's a really fitting episode when we've just had Joanna from JS Geddes on recently. So I think I explained this in one of my previous videos on my story and how I got to where I am, but I don't speak about it much online at the moment. But I actually used to be a kitchen designer, and that was my graduate job from when I left uni and went into the working environment. So I really want to pick up on things that I learned from back then that I still use today, and some things that I come across with clients when I'm working on their kitchen design. We do them, we don't do them very often. Because, you know, most likely you go to a kitchen showroom and supplier like Geddes, but when we do, we kind of follow the exact same steps and processes that we know are tried and tested. So we're going to get straight into it. Here are my most do's and don'ts when it comes to designing your kitchen. So my first thing that I want you to do is to check your appliances, and this is because on the market right now we are very tech home people, and with that comes new gadgets in your kitchen space. So my favourite one is the boiling water tap. I've had this on the vision board since I worked at the kitchen company, that when I have my dream kitchen I'm going to have one of them, and it's a non-negotiable. So that's just one thing that's coming to the market, but it's a good example of how I suppose products and appliances have progressed from, let's say, the kitchen in the house of where you grew up in. But the biggest thing about appliances is to really take care and actually only add things if you want to have them. Other appliances that are really changing the market right now is induction hobs and what they can do. There's a big debate right now on gas or induction, electric. I think that's a bit of a personal choice, so you would need to really sit down and go through that. But even like the ventilation that comes with it, other appliances you have that are now built in, like your dishwasher, fridge and freezer, and the other kind of things are air fryers. Like, they're not really a built-in, but you want to create a space for your appliances if you don't want them hanging all over the worktop area. Now, appliances then ties in to my next point of planning your sockets early, because every appliance will need a plug to go into, if it's something like your microwave or your oven and air fryer type things. And the reason why we need our electrics planned early is basically obviously to support that. But let's say that you are building a carcass that doesn't have a door front because you're going to put your microwave in that. Having a switch for it and also having a switch that's accessible will just make things worth it in the long run. Another thing that I really like to go through is planning storage, and I'm designing my own kitchen at the moment. I don't have a clue when it will get done. We keep getting sidetracked into other projects. But one thing that I'm really specific about, and this is something that I do with clients all the time as well, is actually consider what you're going to put in each cupboard. So rather than just being like door, drawers, door, which I get that you do in terms of your space planning, and depending on the level of kitchen, you would just install that. But I feel like when you've got the time and a bit more funds to actually put into designing your own dream kitchen, you can spend a bit of time here to actually plan what's going to go into them. And the point to make here is that cupboards are not just cupboards anymore. You know, you get drawers with stacks for your plates. I have seen the chopping board trend online, which is quite good because nobody likes the drawer filled with chopping boards that all overlap each other. I have one of them at the moment, and I can assure you it's a big pain in the bum. So planning where your storage is going to go, it'll just save you time in the long run. And this comes back to you specifically and your family and how you like to cook, because that'll decide where you want to put items. One thing that I've seen is really clever that I really want to have in my own kitchen is when you open the dishwasher and the cutlery drawer is right next to it, so you're not having to travel back and forth to unpack and put things back into the dishwasher. I do think that's a really good trick, and it's the reason I'm feeling drawn to it is because actually when we moved into our house, it didn't have a dishwasher. Me and Chris both said, we are not really wanting to do dishes. People, we kind of argue over it. So we're like, let's get one put in. And the only space for it to go is right at the other side of the kitchen. And sometimes half the battle of actually stacking it up. And I know it seems stupid. But these are the things that once you're living with it, you're like, how can I make this easier once we actually go for the kitchen that we're going to have? Another thing that I definitely want you to do is look at materials. Now, materials have changed quite a lot, especially over the past 10 years. There's a lot more on the market. They vary from supplier to supplier. Some of the most common ones that I see now is we obviously have our gloss and our matte, which I'd say are pretty much standards in the kitchen industry. These are ones that have been about for years. I'm now starting to see different wood shades coming in. We've had a big boom in walnut as a trend over the past couple of years, and I'm seeing that coming in. Earthy materials, I would say concrete looked finished doors are starting to come in. And that's a new spec on the market. But then we also have our more traditional shaker style, and what we're actually seeing now is a lot of suppliers are now colour matching them, so they're painted rather than being supplied in only a limited range of finishes. And actually that's quite a good point, because it means you can get it to match your space, and if it's painted it might actually be easier to maintain because it's a wood or MDF finish that you can touch up if there's any, scuffs or wears and tears in general down the line. So I definitely think your materials come into play here. Gloss. People don't like gloss. I think gloss has its place. My last kitchen was gloss, and I think if you're in a really dark kitchen, gloss is really good because it will start to reflect and bounce the light around. And it's completely wipeable. So if you have dirty dogs like me, if you have, kids with dirty hands and fingers, I do feel like it wipes really easy. So even though it might feel like a dated material, it is still just really easy to maintain. Matte is the new gloss. That seems to be what people are striving for. But again, it just depends, I think, on the actual quality and where you get the kitchen from. I can see how it would look better in certain types of colours. I wouldn't choose a black gloss. That kind of gives me early 2000s vibes. Kind of like Joy from Friends Flat, if anybody knows what I'm going for here with the red leather and all that. But black and a matte, I can see that happening, and I can see it being really striking. Obviously, your new materials, I spoke about the concrete effect. Concrete effect was really popular in the grey. I remember they had that in the showroom when I started working there, so I would say we've moved on from it, but we're now seeing it more in the earthier and beigey shades coming through, and they're really good actually just for hiding a bit of dirt. If there is anything on your doors, then you can easily kind of cover it, or don't need to be cleaned as often as a flat mat. So I would say with your kitchen, it is really it's about getting to know you, what bugs you in your current kitchen, how can you fix that. There's a lot of fluff and a lot of frills out there about what you can do with your kitchen as well. So it's just really picking the right spec and the right choices for you that are going to be within your budget. And if you're like me and you want the boiling water tap, then it might mean that there's a compromise somewhere else, like going for more cupboards instead of doors, because we learned in past episodes, obviously a door carcass costs a bit less than a drawer. I'm not sure where I am with my doors and things like that just yet, but I'll be sure to keep you all updated as I go along. So we've kind of covered there all the do's, but I also want to speak about the don'ts, and I think these will just become pretty straightforward, and I've kind of touched on them already, but I just want to clarify on these. So my absolute don't is to not shop someone else's wish list. some things that you might feel like you should just put in because somebody else has it, or because you're spending so much on your kitchen already, you should just fling something in. But actually, you know, if you have that extra bit to spend there, then you could spend it on something else in the kitchen, like your nicer chairs or a nicer piece of lighting, rather than actually on the kitchen itself. I think for an example for me is I really like the idea of the dog bowls, and I've spoken about that before. We've actually just adopted another dog, so if I'd already had them installed, then it's not going to work because I wouldn't have put in enough. So actually from doing that, I'm like, that's that idea out the window. And also, yeah, I just feel like having the dog bowl thing is very permanent. I do like the idea of them not being on the floor and scuffing about, because my dogs are really messy with that. But in terms of like just over the past month, our family dynamics changed and we've brought a second dog into the home. So if we had done that, yeah, it wouldn't be feasible anymore. I would still then have an extra dog bowl on the floor, and the idea would really be pointless. So I have kind of swayed away from that. I am open to other ideas that I might look into about just getting them off the floor. That as well was something I've been thinking about, because obviously as dogs get older, you want to lift them higher up from the floor. So a lot of the pictures I'd seen, they're quite low down, but we have bigger dogs who actually would benefit from the bowls being higher up. I understand not everybody's probably into dogs, but this is just like my personal experience with it. So the other thing not to do, this is a big don't, and this is basically me all over, is don't rush it, because creativity does take time. And let me tell you how many times I've actually changed the layout of my kitchen. I've spoke a lot about the dilemmas of the wall coming down, and there's too many options there, but also too little, because we've still got all the structural work from the past extensions, which is really getting in the way of where my door perfectly would be positioned. But hey, that's just designing. You need to go with the ideas and what's already in place sometimes. But creativity wise, definitely go out to your local showroom, definitely chat to the designers, and I'm even going to say go to a couple, because they might have different ranges and it just depends on who's actually designing it. Somebody might click with you and understand your vision, understand what you don't need and what you do want. Somebody else might limit you to what's just there. So definitely picking a showroom that has actually got a good range, and you'll pick up different ideas from what they've done in their showroom. I'm going to go back to Geddes here because I've been in their showroom and we obviously have something upcoming with them. But it's just very different. It's not like your standard, carcass drawers. There's very unique and quirky ideas there of how you can do your breakfast bar and things like that. But it might not be something that you bring in to your own home, but it gives you an idea of what's possible. Something else that is a big massive don't treat your lighting like an afterthought. So if we look at a kitchen, you usually have three main types of lighting in there. Your number one is your task lighting. So this is the light that is essential for you actually being able to prep without, cutting your fingers off. So this is like your under cabinet lighting and your overhead lighting. You might also have some ambient lighting in there, so that could be a bit more diffused lighting, so that could be positioned strategically. And you also have your feature lighting, so this is over your dining table or your island or your breakfast bar. And the reason why you want to not overlook that is because the lighting creates the vibe. It creates the atmosphere. We don't use our big lights all the time. We use our smaller lights, and it's to create that, ambience, but also making sure that you do have enough lighting in there depending on how you're using the space. This will vary depending obviously on the size of your kitchen and where you need the lighting, but it also gives you the options of what lighting you have on at what time. And obviously we live in a very dark country for half the year, so you will have lights on. Sometimes I see, once obviously everything's been fitted, if there's any lights that you want to add in later on. it's going to be really difficult because that light also needs a switch and it needs wired. If you're thinking a kitchen, there's so much built-ins. You might have tiles and splashback put on the walls, so overlooking this and not deciding on it early enough is going to cause absolute chaos down the line. And that kind of leads me on to my big last don't, and it's don't forget what you can't see. Your budget will be eaten up by everything under the floor and behind the walls before you even get on to fitting your kitchen. So things like, let's say you're doing a full reno rip out, you might want to move the sink, well then you need to move the plumbing. That's something you can't see, but you still need to pay for it. If we're going down the lighting route with all these fancier lights coming in, you're going to then have a lot more electrical work. That again, that's behind the wall, you can't really see it. And these are all just things that are harder to change. And if you overlook these points, if you don't get a true honest cost and decide that you're willing to pay for it to get the final look that you want, then you're either going to be stuck with the kind of layout that you have. If you do go for it, make sure you do get an accurate cost. It's not just, these are more fitting costs and trade costs. Your supplier might do it, as an all-in-one kind of service, but you'll have obviously your kitchen install cost and your kitchen supply cost. So it's bearing in mind that there's going to be an install cost there that might affect, because let's say that there's these things being moved that's not considered. First thing that's going to get chopped from your budget is going to be that boiling water tap or that fancy oven that you put in, and you'll need to change maybe appliances. So it's worth getting a full budget before actually committing to anything, because obviously we can always compromise, but it's learning or knowing what the key points are, what we want to get from our kitchen, so we know if there's a compromise needed in there, we can be like, right, that's fine, we can downgrade that, but I really want my boiling water tap and I'm not willing to compromise on that. With the boiling water tap, you also need the cupboard below for it all its the equipment that comes with it, so that's a space taker, not a space saver, so that's something that could knock on the effect of your overall storage. If you want to find out more about kitchens, then we actually have an event upcoming with JS Geddes, which I'm super excited about. So on the 30th of July, it's a panel event and they're absolutely stunning showroom. It's also being renovated right now, so this will be a little sneak peek at what's new in the showroom. If you'd like to get your hands on a ticket or find out any more information, we'll have it down in the bio. If you're doing a kitchen renovation or actually just any type of renovation, we have a special panel lined up to give you all the information and honest feedback that you need to get unstuck in your home. I'd love to see you there. Let me know if you need any details for it, and I'll see you in the next one.